Three, two, one. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, another Lightforge ahead, and we have actual news this week.
Actual news. Things have happened. Because we pre-recorded like one day early, the last one, and then, news comes out the next day, of course.
Yeah.
Always.
So, ADWCTA, what has happened? What's going on? What are we talking about first?
Okay.
There's actually multiple.
There's actually a lot of things. But let's talk about one thing first, which is card nerfs, which affects everybody. And there's two parts of the discussion. This is going to be like a pretty newsy kind of discussion. And then we'll talk about hunters and float bats. Because, that's fun. But let's go with the card news first. Do you have a list of cards? Because a lot of cards got nerfed. Blizzard came out with like a post that says, hey, we're not going to do it yet, but in the very next patch, we will nerf a whole bunch of cards. And they're doing this, everyone kind of figured, because there's some kind of constructed tournament or something going on right now this weekend. Probably right now as we're like broadcasting this. I'm not really sure. But that's going to delay the actual implementation of changes they wanted, because once Blizzard makes this live, if you do it in the middle of a tournament, it's going to like screw over all these people's decks, right?
Yeah.
So they couldn't do it.
All right. You want me to read the list of changes?
Yes, please read the list of changes.
Okay. So, guys, Blizzard has stated in an upcoming update, we will be making balance changes to the following cards. First card, Innervate from Druid. It is changing from gain 2 mana crystals this turn only to gain 1 mana crystal this turn only. Essentially, it's a coin now. It has turned from double coin to single coin. So now we have the coin, we have counterfeit coin, and we have Innervate. They all do the same thing. So,
spoiler. So one thing we're going to do is when these card nerfs, I'm going to tell you the new tier list scores of all these new cards, because like just so you get an idea. They may change whenever the patch comes out, but I doubt it. I think these are pretty final as far as the scores go. And so Innervate obviously is going to drop down a ton. It's right now at a 132, and it's going to drop down to basically where the actual coin is, even lower than that. It's going to be a 76.
Ooh, which makes a lot of sense.
It's a crappy card.
Yeah, it's not a good card anymore. And wow, who knew that basically taking away 50% of a card's effectiveness would lower its score by a ton,
if you take Flame Strike and you make it into a Consecration, it's a pretty bad card. That's just what's going to happen. And this is one of those casualties of constructed. Blizzard needed some design space. Innervate was really screwing with the design space. It was a totally good card in Arena. It was like one of the defining cards for Druid. One of the only ways in Arena Druid is different than like any other class, because they're like otherwise such an average class. Like such a boring, average, normal class, which I didn't mind, but I know a lot of people were thrilled with Druid because of that. And now this is this whole ramp thing has just taken a hit, and so that's one of the areas that made Druid actually unique in the arena. So it's kind of sad to see. But one thing that from an arena perspective is that you're always going to cater to constructed, right? Like if changes are needed for constructed, arena's going to get hurt. It's just going to get swept along into these changes, and there's nothing really you can do about it at this point. So that is obviously a bad change. It was a card that was not overpowered in the arena, and it's going to be like knocked down to near unplayability. Yeah,
I definitely agree. Like Innervate actually made Druid feel unique, right? Because one of the things about Druid, which has always been a knock on them, is their power level has always been like midway. Right, like the power level of Druid cards has been like meh, and they've been riding on their flexibility a lot.
Yep.
But Innervate was something unique and powerful, which is really cool. So really a disappointment. But I don't know. I mean, I understand. This is something I totally understand from a constructed aspect that Innervate needed to be changed.
Yep. So, I mean, this is also the worst change that's going to happen. The other changes, Merps will run down for you, are not as bad for from like an arena perspective. Because remember, once these changes happen, they're like there forever. This is like Blizzard's not going to go back on these changes. So we just lost Innervate, like basically in the card pool. It's a pretty big hit for Warrior. Class balance wise, not too big of a deal because Druid has like so many like good cards now, with offering bonuses too that Innervate doesn't even have. But you know, it's a thing, and this is the worst change to impact the arena that's happening.
Well, we'll definitely talk about. You know which card I'm going to save for last. But anyways, the next card that is getting changed is Spreading Plague. We're staying in the Druid class. Spreading Plague right now is 5 mana, and it is changing to 6 mana. If you guys don't remember, Spreading Plague is a rare spell that summons a 1/5 Scarab with Taunt, and if your opponent has more minions, cast this again. So it is going from 5 to 6 mana.
So this is apparently really powerful constructed. It was good in Arena, but it wasn't like
it was pretty good. It was pretty good
thing ever. Like we had it rated a 108. We were pretty happy with it at a 108, and it's gonna go down only 15 points to a 93. So still definitely a playable card. You'll still pick it. It just rose by 1 mana. Like it's not, and this is like a reactive card. It's not like you were ever gonna play it on curve. So it's really not that big of a hit.
No, and this is a card that can certainly get lots of value in Arena, but at the same time, you know, when they only have like a minion or, you know, even just 2 minions, you're not really that happy playing this. So it's not that big of a deal. It was never that great of a card, and going from 5 to 6 mana isn't like Innervate losing 50% of its effect.
But it's another Druid card, right? So Druids are being hurt a bit, and this makes sense because Druid's apparently dominating Constructed or whatever. And I thought that it was the #1 class in the Arena. So now that they've heard it a little bit, I feel more comfortable because we've never like officially moved it up to be in its own tier. It's always been like with Paladin and Rogue, and I don't think it's moving from that either. I don't think it's going to drop out of the Paladin Rogue tier just because of these 2 changes.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the changes coming to the Druid class. We have 3 more cards that are going to be changed/nerfed. The next one is a very familiar card, Shaman's Hex, which now costs 4 mana instead of 3. And I don't think I need to describe what Hex is to you guys. So once again, now this is just sort of a polymorph alternative.
Yes, such a good change. Oh my god, when I saw this change, I was like, thank you, Blizzard. I've been waiting for this change forever, and it just never came. Like, remember when Shaman was super good, like in Constructed, and everyone was complaining about Shaman? I was like, oh, maybe they'll nerf Hex at this point, because it's just such a stupid card, and they didn't. We know what polymorph is. And like Hex was 1 mana lower, despite doing more or less the same thing. Like it's, you know, it gives you, it actually like gives your opponent a slightly worse thing. So it should have costed a little more than polymorph, but it instead cost 1 mana less. So it was always a problematic card, right? And this is kind of the theme of what Blizzard's going for in these like overall nerfs of these cards. They took cards that were problematic, even old cards, like you'll see another one coming up, and they're just fixing them to be good. Here's a stat, which is that there were only 3 cards that were over 200 rating on our tier list in the classic or basic set. Only 3 cards. One was Hex. One is Gorehowl, which is not being touched, and it's a epic. And the third one is also getting nerfed. So there's a consistency in what Blizzard's doing here, which is that they're taking these absurdly overvalued classic and basic cards, which are going to appear in every single meta, and they're knocking them down. And I love this change for Hex. I think it was a long time coming. It's needed. And classic cards just shouldn't get so powerful, or else they start dominating a particular class in a particular meta.
Yep. All right, I like this change too, and it's a card that is not very problematic right now, but Blizzard has stated that they're doing it for future,
and
design
they should. And for Arena, it's good. You don't want hexes in the Arena. Like, yes, Shaman is horrible right now, and they will get even worse with a 4 mana hex. But hex is moving down from 2/24 or something like that. Sorry, no, not 2/24. 2/1 something. 214 points. Down to a 183. That's not going to affect where you draft hex. You know, like it's still one of the best cards in Shaman. You're still going to pick it all the time. So it doesn't really have a real effect in the Arena. Very minor effect because it's still a good card. It's not like they're lowering its offering rate. It's not like they're removing it from the arena. It's just, it's going to be fine, right? Like, this is a very good change for Hex. And you don't, like, as a good player, you don't want the swings. And Hex gives swings. And so you rather your opponents not have hexes and you not have hexes than both of you having hexes.
Yep. Okay, so next card is actually a neutral card. It is an epic minion Murloc War Leader, which is a 3-mana 3/3, and it has the text, your other Murlocs have +2/+1. It is getting changed so that the text now reads, your other Murlocs have +2 attack. So it's getting nerfed in a way in which it does not give your other Murlocs +1 health now. Which
it's fair.
Good. I think
it now
it's fair.
matches the Pirate Captain, the South Sea Captain one, which is +1/+1. This can be +2/+0. They're both 3-mana 3/3s. So it's fine. It's not going to affect the score because this was never a big deal.
Yeah, this is a change that might matter a little bit in some, a Blue Moon game, but nothing that we really need to talk about. Okay, now the big change, and I'm pretty sure we have some thoughts on this. Fiery War Axe. Okay, Fiery Wind Axe, one of the best cards in the game. All the way
242.
Yeah, 242 on the tier list. Fiery War Axe is now going to cost 3 mana instead of 2 mana.
It's 50% increase in mana. So this is dropping from 242 to a 171. So it goes from auto pick to auto pick. I'm going to repeat that because a lot of people think Fiery War Axe is going to go to a place where no one wants to pick it. It is going to be an auto pick card. You will pick a Fiery War Axe whenever you see it. So its tier list score is still extremely good, but part of the reason is because it was just... It was insane. It was stupid. Everyone called it Fiery Wind Axe for a reason. It's because if you got it out on turn 2, you won the game. That is not good for the game. It's really not good for a card to just win you the game if you can play it on curve, right? That's never a good thing for the game because that's not very interactive. That's not very whatever. And so Fiery War Axe was always a problematic card, especially in the arena where tempo is king and weapons are amazing. And Fiery War Axe kind of always got the pass because warriors suck so much. That it was always like, wow, it's fine that they have Fiery War Axe because they otherwise suck so much. Which is okay if all you cared about is winning half your games as warrior, but that's not okay if what you care about is making warrior a class that you can face and compete with on like kind of equal skill-based areas, right? In that case, Fiery War Axe is, as Blizzard has noticed, a pretty problematic card. And they nerfed it in a pretty lame way. They increased the mana by 1. You know, Eaglehorn Bow is a card. You know, what is Rallying Blade's a card.
Rallying Blade is a card. They had King's Defender previously, right?
Those are all cards that are 3 mana, 3/2 weapon. That also does something. So now Fiery War Axe just kind of sucks. It went from a premium card to a relative to these other card, pretty crappy card.
So here's the thing, which if you're listening, you're like, oh, it went from auto pick to auto pick. So it's like, so you guys must be okay with the change. That's not the case for me.
Yeah, I'm okay with the change, but I do think that the impact is very heavy here. So whereas this is not like Hex, right? Like Hex got moved down, but nothing really matters. It's still great. You still pick it. It's still fine. Fiery War Axe is going to cause problems in the arena. Because it's going to make the warriors, and we said, right, it's going to make the shamans a little bit worse, and that's unfortunate, but whatever for Hex. But the Fiery War Axe change is actually going to really hurt the warriors in the arena. And that's because Fiery War Axe is a 2-drop. It's the best 2-drop. It's an auto-pick 2-drop. And to take away, and it has an offering bonus because it's a weapon, and there's weapon offering bonuses. And to take that away from the warrior means that they get 1/2 less 2-drops per run on average. Which is huge, because they're already struggling in the 2-drop apocalypse. So, yeah, it's still a really good card, but adding 3-drops and taking away 2-drops does not really help the warrior. They could have added a better 3-drop than Fiery War Axe. It still would have hurt the warrior to change Fiery War Axe.
Yeah, this is a change that I really do not like. And I understand, once again, this is Arena just sort of being affected by Constructed, right? They changed it because I don't know. They didn't specifically mention like Pirate Warrior, but Blizzard has said raising its mana cost by 1 will slow down the warrior's tempo and lower the overall power level of the card.
Yep.
I'm guessing, you know, Pirate Warrior has been, you know, a tier 1 deck, if not like a, you know, high tier 2 deck for quite a while on the constructed scene. They see Fiery War Axe as, you know, a card that quickly snowballs with upgrade and Bloodsail. What was it? Bloodsail Cultist? I forget. The 3 mana 3/4. In order to, you know, just get a lot of face damage in. I understand that. I just really hate this because it takes away so much power from warriors. Like it takes away their best card that was in the Evergreen set, right? Mm-hmm. And certainly you can give warriors good cards like they have done with like, you know, Obsidian Destroyer, with Fool's Bane, and just expansions with good cards. But because of the warrior's hero power and because of the nature of warrior, as soon as there is a bad expansion, warriors are like, yeah, they have nothing to fall back on, right? Like their core set has taken a hit once again. And that's kind of why I don't like it. Like Fiery War Axe was always there as a sort of a stabilizing factor because it's powerful and it's a 2-drop, right? Okay. It's a very cheap card that they can play.
I disagree that that's a good thing, though. Like, I do think warriors need a 2-drop, and that they're going to suck in this meta, like, a ton. Not this meta, just they don't have enough power and they don't have enough 2-drops. It's horrible for the warrior. Like, don't play warrior. We told you not to play warrior before, but, like, definitely don't play warrior now. But I don't think it's a bad thing. And I don't think it's a bad thing because Fiery War Axe, I think, was a problem. That is not how you want to balance the game. You don't want to balance the game by giving any class more Fiery War Axes. That's bad and lazy balancing. Now, Blizzard didn't balance the arena by giving warriors Fiery War Axes, but what works in forward logic also works in reverse logic. If you wouldn't give the warriors more Fiery War Axes to balance it, then you're okay taking away Fiery War Axes. It's the same exact thing, because Fiery War Axe is a bad card for balance. It gets rid of skill in the arena. Weapons are normally like very skillful cards, but this one was so strong on curve. And obviously it doesn't really matter off curve like as much. It's a pretty normal card off curve, but it was so strong on curve that it absolutely dominated Curvestone if you could get it on curve. And if you couldn't, Warrior was just as bad as it used to be without the Fiery War Axe. So you create this dynamic where if you can get a Fiery War Axe on curve, your chances to win is so high, and otherwise your chance to win is still pretty crappy. That's not how you want to balance the class. You can get the number close to 50% win rate for the average player, but if you're a skilled player and you're looking to improve, it's always been a crutch that the warrior has used. And one thing that we know is Blizzard really cares about this 50% win rate per class per average player thing. So when you get rid of the crutches, I think it's going to force Blizzard to do things to the arena to actually like fix warrior for lack of a better way of doing it. And like there's very little Blizzard could do to the arena that's worse than adding more Fiery War Axes, like in my opinion. So I think this is like an overall positive change.
Gotcha. Yeah, you're sort of looking forward, right? Yeah, I think we can agree about that. Like I also don't want sort of the quote balance to be, oh, if you have a Fiery War Axe, you win. If you don't have it, you lose. And it averages out to 50-50 or like 50% win rate, right? Yeah. Or like you have a Gorehowl versus not having a Gorehowl. Like these total like powerful swing cards, right? And then like by having them, you have a really high win rate. If you don't have them, you have a very low win rate. Mm-hmm. And then that's the balance right there. Yeah. Like you don't want these like polar distributions.
That's not good for skill because it makes skill matter less.
I agree. I agree. What I don't like about it right now is just like, because the kind of fix that you're talking about is going to take a while, right? It won't just come, I don't think, in the next expansion.
I don't think, well, not only that, like, I think, first of all, if you're looking at micro adjustments, that's not going to cover the gap. Warriors are so bad right now. Like, just leave Warrior for dead. This expansion, Warrior is not in the meta. This is like, you know, in the pits of hashtag Arena Warriors Matters levels of the Warrior being really bad. Just like, don't touch the Warrior. But you shouldn't have been touching the Warrior before this anyway. Warrior was bad before this change in this meta. before they killed War Axe in KFT, we kept saying Warrior all the way to the bottom, Shaman all the way to the bottom. Don't touch these classes. For Shaman, if you're not like a really good player, at least you have some RNG going for you. Warrior's got nothing. Just like, don't touch that. And that hasn't changed. So I think Blizzard had failed in their objective to actually give class balance to the arena for the lower end so hard with the Warrior and the Shaman that it doesn't really matter if they continue sucking in this expansion. Like, yeah, we're just at that point. And then next expansion, you know, or maybe the next idea that they have to do something, maybe they'll balance the Warrior. So yeah, like, I agree. Warrior's not balanced right now, but I don't think it got terribly like less balanced from the perspective of should you play Warrior. And the answer was no, you're at a huge disadvantage. And the answer now is no, you're at a huge disadvantage. So in much the same way that I'm saying like Fiery War Axe was auto pick, still is auto pick. It's the same thing, right? Like, did it lose like 20% of its score? Yes, it lost 20% of its score. That is really bad for most cards, but for Fiery War Axe, and at such a high score, you're still going to pick it. Same way, Warrior was so bad in KFT, you're still not going to pick it if you care about winning. So, yep. I don't know. Like, this isn't like, hey, Blizzard, good job. This is like, well, Blizzard, you've done such a bad job with balancing the Warrior that this is kind of the best time to do something like this.
Sure. It's ripping off the Band-Aid. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Right. Fiery War Axe was doing a lot for the Warrior, and by taking that away, maybe we'll see some good changes.
So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about the card nerfs. I just like that they're like, I'm all about consistency, right? And I know there's some people in the chat who are like, hey, are they nerfing Fireball? I hope they don't nerf Fireball. I'm okay if they nerf Fireball, but the point is, if you look at Fireball, it's a 143 on the tier list. 143. Yeah. A Flame Strike is a 149. These are considered like, oh, maybe problematic cards in the arena, or like people are like, oh, these are so powerful, but they're not. Fiery War Axe was a 241. Hex was a 214. Those were really powerful. These cards are just regular premium cards. Like, there's a difference. It's not like Blizzard's going to go back and nerf all the premium cards, or at least I hope not. Or if they do, it doesn't even matter because I just don't like premium cards. All cards should be Yetis in my book for you know, skill-based fun. But these were like literally at the top end of problematic. There are, like I said before, right? There are no other cards we rate higher than a 200 in the basic and classic set besides Gorehowl. And I would not be surprised if they nerf Gorehowl. And I would be fully supportive of them nerfing Gorehowl, because right now, Warrior is kind of like, do you have a Fool's Bane or a Gorehowl? If you don't, you lose. If you do, you're maybe okay. So it's not like it's healthy right now. Like, I have a 5-0 Warrior right now. Why? Because I have Malkazar, Gorehowl, and Fool's Bane. And one of those cards wins me every game so far. And at some point, I either won't get one of my weapons, or the Malkazar will screw me over, and we'll be done, right? Like, that's not good for class balance.
Yeah. This will just be the first of many changes, right? We see that Blizzard has taken a very hands-on approach to sort of changing cards and also changing up the arena. So we'll see. Like Fiery War Axe, maybe. Well, I'm hoping that you're right, and they use this as sort of a catalyst to make Warriors better in a healthy fashion.
Yeah, I mean, they already have an explicit goal to make the average player get 50% win rate. The average player really sucks with Warrior, so they have a long way to go on that one. So yeah, okay, so that's kind of card nerfs overall. Yes, it will be bad for the arena right now. Yes, this is arena being dragged around by Constructed, but I think you kind of just have to accept that arena will be dragged around by Constructed. Because if they're changing cards for Constructed, what, are you gonna have two different versions of a card floating around? No, that's kind of a silly idea. So this is all we got. This is just something I think you kind of have to deal with, and I don't think there's really a good solution here, or that a good solution Blizzard could implement. So you either kind of like live with these superpower cards, or you rip off the Band-Aid, as Merp said at some point. And this is a pretty good time to rip off the Band-Aid for Hex and for a Fiery War Axe, in the arena at least.
Yep.
Okay, so now let's talk about the bigger change, because that change affects like very little. Like you'll sometimes feel drafting warrior, you shouldn't be playing shaman or you'll sometimes feel playing druid. You will, pretty much not play warrior and shaman anyway, so you won't even notice them. But this next change affects everything.
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 I like it. All right, so about 2 days ago-ish, or a day and a half ago, Blizzard, and by Blizzard I mean Mike Deny.
No, you mean Blizzard made an announcement on Battle.net, Hearthstone. Maybe in a patch note, maybe in a blog post explaining themselves.
Yeah, that would be what we would expect, but it didn't exactly.
What? It didn't happen? That's not how Blizzard communicated? How did Blizzard communicate? How did they use? Did they tweet it out?
Oh no, that would be really public and very accessible, right? But there was this post made 2 days ago that just by someone on Reddit saying, anyone else tired of Auctioneer, Bookworm, Devilsaur Egg as their first choice in Arena? And of course, everyone was like, yeah, yes, I'm tired of it.
Yes, we're all tired of it. We've been tired of it.
And then about a day and a half ago, Mike Denay posted and said,
you picked up my horrible pronunciation of his name.
I have no. Wait, what is the right way?
It's Denay. It's Donay. It's either Donay or Denay. It's definitely not Denias. That's how I pronounce it.
Mike Denay posted exactly this. This won't be removed in the balance patch, as that was added as a quick bonus patch. It will be removed in a patch after that, though.
It will be removed.
So
synergies are gone.
Will be gone at some point in the
nearest future, hopefully, because the only reason they kept synergy picks around was because they were screwing around with it and trying to make it work. That's like what Ben Brode said, and we were like, that's a horrible idea because your whole system doesn't work and it's going to take you a long time to figure it out. And now they seem to have finally come around. It's 4 weeks later. They could have made Arena better for an entire month, but they've come around to being like, oh yeah, when the entire community, whether you are casual or an expert, all together complain about one thing, it's probably not a very good idea. We probably screwed that up. They finally come to that conclusion, but what that means is they're no longer developing the idea. And if they're no longer developing the idea, there's no reason for them not to pull it out at the absolute first possible opportunity. So whenever they can technically do it without messing up all their other versioning and whatever systems is going on, they'll do it. So I think it's going to happen fairly soon. Like, not in the next patch, but in whatever the patch after that they can get out would be.
Yeah, so, this sort of ends the little foray or experiment into synergies. I could not be happier. Look, I'm happy that this is going away. And here's the thing that I saw, right? Like, a lot of people after they saw this news, understandably happy. But then I saw some people be like, you know what? Like, I'm really glad. It just means that Blizzard listens to our feedback. And I'm like, wait.
They listen to it, and then they listen to it some more, and then they continue listening to it, and then they keep listening to it, and they listen to it a lot. Actually, the amount of listening to it that they do is way more than what a reasonable person would listen to it. Just so much listening that's happening. And then 6 weeks later, they'll do what they should have done 6 weeks ago.
Or look, we are always about process, right? It's always about the process. Like, the end result is important, but process is also very important as well. And it doesn't, even though they're getting rid of it, doesn't change the fact that they put out this experiment and basically said, okay, people who play the Arena, just kind of like test this for us.
Figure it out. Like, tell us what's wrong with it, if there's anything wrong with it at all. And when we did, they're like, oh, cool, we'll make it better. Just hang out there. And then when they didn't, or they did make it better, but it wasn't all that much better, we're like, hey, it's still not better. And they're like, okay, give us some, hold on, try again. Hold on, try again. Until they're like, all right, we can't do this. This is fundamentally not how this system would work. It would take like a whole different thing to actually accomplish what we want.
So for the people who enjoy playing the arena, for the people who go for the leaderboards, for those people, there was no warning about this. It was just, you know, in the
let's not talk about the leaderboard. This affects everybody.
Oh, yeah, it affects everyone. It was just, it's like, hey, by the way, here are synergies. Like now, you know, it just like happened out of the blue, and yeah, here you go. Let's test it for us.
Let's talk about how historic of a thing this is. Like, this is how, never underestimate how bad synergy picks were, because Blizzard pulled it back, and this is literally the only change since the release of Hearthstone they have gone back on. Literally the only change ever that they have actually gone back on and said, okay, that doesn't work, we're not doing that. That's how bad it was. That's how universally bad it was to everybody, as everybody kind of figured out within a few days of playing in this system. So right now, I mean, I have a pet peeve of this, like, you know, that's I'll bring up later. But right now, at least, Blizzard hasn't said anything about their system or anything like that. They may still come out with other changes for us to test, you know, as a community, by publishing it in a patch with no explanation. They may not do that anymore. We don't really know. They haven't admitted fault or proposed or like said we'll do better. They haven't even done any of that. All they've said so far is, you know, we want to communicate with you guys. We want to communicate. It's all about communication. We should work together as a community. And I wrote a nice long DM to Blizzard. Merps did the same. It's been like 6 weeks now, no response, because this is how you communicate with people, I guess. Like, you know, we were saying this like right afterwards, right? Like almost immediately afterwards, that Blizzard is going to talk a good game because they have to, right? I'm not saying that like, oh no, why would Ben Brode respond to the post and say that they're going to do this? That's PR. That's what they're supposed to do. That's like literally like more than half of his job, I feel like. And that's fine. But like, don't be fooled. When Blizzard says they are going to work with the community, they have their interpretation of that, and I'm sure they're doing that. But it doesn't mean what I think a lot of people were misled, and that was kind of the intention, right? They're hoping that you would see that and be like, oh, okay, that's good, that's good. I like that. I like hearing that. I feel good. And I'm sure they are not lying about it. I'm sure they did go out and listen to more people and like solicit more feedback. But it's not what you think. They're not actually going out there and like figuring stuff out the way that you or I might. They're doing it the way that Blizzard does it. So I don't think anything's really changed, except that after 6 weeks, they finally figured out the like full depth of like how bad their system was and how unsavable it is in a, you know, quick time frame. And I don't know. I hope they've learned their lesson when it comes to actually testing their stuff in a more thorough than their current system way. Like, a lot of people complain, it's like, oh, you can't possibly know what their protocols are and how they test things. How could you know it wasn't enough? I'm like, I see the results. This is not like, this is so bad in such an obvious way that they obviously, whatever system they have, it needs to be better. Like, sometimes the results just dictate that. And I don't know if they made it better. I hope they did, because this is a pretty bad, like, result for Blizzard, and obviously for the Arena community. But maybe they have, maybe they haven't. We still don't know. There's no communication, right? Blizzard keeps talking about communication, and they do like none of it. And even their statement of like, oh yeah, this is gonna go away, is it not even in a Reddit post, in a comment to a Reddit post with no further explanations.
Right. So let's basically just remember that synergy picks came with no warning as a sort of like one-liner in an update, and they leave in a Reddit comment. And this is it. Like one of the most influencing things in your arena draft came just like randomly in a one-liner in an update, and it's going to leave as a Reddit comment. That's it.
So yeah. So I haven't written anything critical of Blizzard that I posted onto, you know, the main subreddit of Hearthstone in more than 1.5 years. Like, last time was Arena Warriors Matter, but that's how bad this is. That I actually did something. And then I got, like, as soon as Ben Brode said anything, I got so much pushback on people being like,
Oh,
how are you mean to Ben Brode? I'm like, I know what he's about. I know what his job is. I know what his statement is. His statement was no. Like we said before on a previous Lightforge, right? Appreciate that he actually gave an answer, but the answer was no, and people don't realize that. And then Ben Brode went on about communications, and you see what the communication is like. The communication is still no. So this is just what's happening. I'm glad they pulled it back, and I'm glad that that happened. But I don't know if anything's changed. They haven't said that anything's changed, and maybe they pulled it back because they talked to the super casual people, and the super casual people are like, yeah, it took me 6 weeks to play 3 arenas, but after 3 arena runs, I just got offered eggs too many times that it wasn't fun. And they're like, testers are like, yeah, that sounds about right. And they're like, all right, well, these casual people that have done it in the course of 6 weeks have now spoken. We can add their opinions into our metric along with the hardcore people who don't seem to like it. And so now we have finally determined that nobody likes it. And I think we can probably pull this change. Like, that's their process right now, maybe. We don't know anything. This is just a hypothesis. And, but there's got to be a reason why they held on for 6 weeks when the change was obvious to anyone who played, like, a number of arena drafts. Not even played, but like if you just had a number of arena drafts, you'd figure it out. And if you played, you'd figure it out because you saw eggs everywhere, and then you saw like these like Jaina's everywhere. Like it was weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, and this is how they're going to end it. So yeah, at least they ended it. They didn't have to end it. Like there are worse worlds that we could live in. They could have legitimately kept trying to iterate on this until they made it work, which probably wouldn't happen until like a year from now, and we would be like stuck with it. That could have legitimately happened. So, huge props to Blizzard for actually pulling the change back. But it's not solving the root of the problem, right? Like, and maybe they have solved the root of the problem, they just haven't announced it yet. But I just, once again, this is our podcast, and it's about what's actually happening in the arena. So we want you to know that, yes, it's being pulled back. Yes, that's great. But what's actually happening in the arena, we still don't know. Like they actually made another like comment on Reddit, I think today or like yesterday, where someone was like, Arena should be wild, and they're like, well, we're not gonna really make Arena wild, but we have a lot of exciting changes coming to the Arena, and we'll let you know like once we roll them out. And I'm sitting here like, okay, that's good, but please roll them out in a better way than the synergy thing. Like, what are we doing? Are we getting synergy picks 2.0 in like a different way, or are we getting like a well-tested, well-developed run by like people who actually play the arena at a high level like changes? I don't know what we're getting. I'm scared. Like, I'm hoping that this thing was so big and so bad that they had to pull it back, and it was at that level that they're like, all right, we've learned our lesson, we're gonna test this, like, if not as much as our constructed stuff or a new expansion, enough, right? Like, much more so than before. And instead of like going to, they mentioned Hafu and Crip and saying something like, more synergies, good, huh? To actually be like, all right, here's how we're gonna implement this. How do you think, do you see any problems with that? Like, yeah. Maybe, hopefully, or they could just try it again and hope for better results, in which case, I hope they get good results, but if they don't, we're going to be the ones that are going to suffer for another 6 weeks.
It's basically it. So, look, rest in peace, synergy picks. If we see you in the future, hopefully it is a much better system, like a system, not just first 2 picks are these predetermined set of cards that have no impact on the rest of your draft. And yeah, we've mentioned this before, and I keep on going back to it. It's crazy seeing sort of the 2 Blizzard games, Overwatch and Hearthstone, and the difference in implementing big changes, right? Mm-hmm. In which Overwatch will announce a big change, announce the philosophy for doing that. And to be fair, Blizzard does that with like these nerfs or constructed cards. They don't do that ahead of time for arena changes. Not really. They just like put it out there. And on Overwatch, there's a PTR, right? And not only do people test on the PTR, the changes, don't always survive the way that they, come onto the PTR. Like they will be further tweaked. this also gives the Overwatch team a way to like try really crazy things, right? Like to really boost someone's damage, to really nerf someone, and then see how it fits. And it's a pretty, healthy.
Here's the thing with Overwatch's PTR, for example. Like 90% of the changes, 95% of the changes make it to live with no change whatsoever. But that 5 to 10% that would otherwise break the game gets immediate, huge, heavy backlash, and they're like, "Oh crap, we'll do something with that." So that's what the PTR is there for, or any kind of system. Like, you just basically need a sanity check from people who are actually like players of this game type and who know what they're doing to be like, "Oh no, this is really insanely bad. Please don't do this." And Blizzard doesn't have that, and they don't have to trust us. They can trust the slightly more casual people. They can trust the Krip or Hafu. They can trust internal, but they just have to get someone who can do it, right? Like, whatever happened with the synergy picks, whatever their process was, it was someone who couldn't do the job.
Yeah. All right. That's basically it for synergies. I look forward to having them be gone. And as soon as they are gone, we will definitely tell you guys how to change your playstyle for it. But for now, synergy picks are still here.
They're still here, yeah. We're not going to super analyze what the KFT meta really is, because we're still not really in the KFT meta right now. We're in like the halfway KFT synergy pick meta.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on to question from the GOAT. Question from the GOAT?
Question from the GOAT comes from someone on Twitter. It is Stephen Matz. Stephen asks, what are some things to look for when drafting to help tell what direction a draft is going, i.e. control versus mid-range? I think this is a good question. This is something that people are confused about quite often during the draft, because at the end of the draft, you can kind of tell, oh, I have a control deck. Oh, I have a mid-range deck or an aggro deck. But it's like, when can you tell what direction it's going? It's like, do I sort of evaluate on pick 15? Can I do it as early as pick 7? I'm curious what you think about this.
I want to say that you don't know until later on, unless like have them in your mind, your amount of expected stuff, right? Like, I expect 6/2 drops, 5 3 drops, 4 4 drops, 1 or 2 1 drops, if I'm going for like, if it's a more aggro class or whatever. And I expect like 10 removals, I don't know, like 3 cards 7 mana or over, and X amount of big cards, and just have this like sense generally, right, of like, what decks have worked for you, what decks do you see other people going 12 with, what decks do you see streamers go 12 with, and just kind of have a general sense of that. And then if you're ever too far up or too far down, to adjust for it and try to hit those like good areas that you see people do. So one thing that definitely happens is people ignore things for way too long. Like, if you're following the tier list very directly, you may end up with not enough initiative. You may end up with not enough of a curve. You may end up with not enough of like, so many things. And on the other hand, some people over adjust, where they're like, hey, I'm 10 picks in, I only have 2 2-drops. That's not good. I need to end up at 6. So I'm gonna, overdraft a 2-drop by like 20 points. And that's not really necessary, because you're 10 picks in, which is a third of the draft, and you have 2 2-drops, and you want 6, you're fine. Like, maybe if you're really scared and conservative, to overdraft by like a couple of points, but definitely don't overdraft by like 5 or 10 points from it. And then on the other hand, if you're 15 picks in and you have 0 2-drops, yes, overdraft. Please take a 2-drop. You're going to need it, because you're going to need another one on top of that, and then another one just to catch up. So definitely take the 2-drops. So you have to like kind of get a good sense of like how urgently you need to push a deck to get to a certain place or not.
Yeah. So I would say that there are some cards that are so kind of defining that you, by themselves, they already push you in a direction very heavily, right? For example, a card like Frostlich Jaina, right? If you're playing Mage, you have a decent chance of getting Frostlich Jaina because of synergy picks, and that will push you towards, a sort of a more control-y style in which you can always grind them out with Frostlich Jaina. There are also some cards in which that can go both ways. Like if you're playing Hunter and you get Eaglehorn Bow, you're like, oh, this is, even though it can be very aggressive, you can also just use it as a convenient 2-for-1 in the mid game as well. So be careful when sort of categorizing cards, though. Some cards that you may see as only being able to play one way, they can play both ways. But you want to look out for those cards. And then also, I think I very much agree with ADWCTA's assessment that you want to see what should I have by pick 10? What should I have by pick 15? And then evaluate, well, what should I have versus what do I have right now in terms of the quality of cards, the mana cost, and the speed of the deck. And if it is so sort of different than the quote, norm, and the norm is sort of like a mid-range deck, right? If you're still on the mid-range path, I would say, then it can still go in any direction.
I always try to push it back to the mid-range path. The time that you end up with like an aggro or like a control deck is when you try to push it to the mid-range path and the game won't let you. Like,
right.
You're like, hey, I'm going to overpick 2s. And the game is like, yep, we're not going to give you any 2s for the next 5 picks. So you could try to overpick it all you want, but you're not going to get the option. And in that case, you end up with a really, really controlled deck. And also, like, look at what you need, right? Like, if you're looking at it and you're like, I'm missing 2s, like, know that you are at risk of being a control. I always look at it this way, like, am I at risk of being an aggro deck? Am I at risk of being a control deck? Because you want to push it to the middle. So if I start being at risk of being an aggro deck, I'm going to take some more reach cards, just in case. Like, if I can't push my deck back into the middle, I don't want to be dead with a stupid aggro deck that doesn't have any reach. That's a horrible result. Similarly, if I'm at risk of being a control deck because I'm not going to curve out or because whatever, I'm going to want some more extra taunts or freezes or like, board clears, because I don't want to end up as a control deck without those things. That's like just a totally bad losing deck. So that's how I draft when it comes to like, do I overvalue a taunt, for example? Or do I overvalue like a 1-drop or a card with reach versus one without? Like, even if I'm not truly an aggro deck, I look at my risk.
Yeah. It's all risk assessment from the draft to the games. Yep. So, once again, there's no short answer, right? There's no easy answer to this. It comes from experience. But just always be evaluating your deck versus the normal deck and look out for those defining cards.
Yep. That sounds good. So that is Question from the GOAT. Question from the GOAT is brought to you by our patrons. Patreon.com/grinninggoat. They are our supporters that keep the light on at the Lightforge. And this month, the month of September, top patrons are 4P, Afro Ninja TB, Ingo, Rami Sasan, Talon, and Ugbog, and Zaruvi. Thank you guys so much as always. Your support really means a lot to us. And again, that's patreon.com/grinninggoat. If you would like to also become a patron, we would really appreciate it. Okay, so let's move on to... We're gonna mix the two, right? Let's just start talking about card good bad, and then we'll get to class talk Hunter, because we're about to play Hunter run after this, and we have kind of different ideas of how to play Hunter these days. But okay, card good bad, Exploding Bloat Bat. We said we'd make a bad card, and we picked one of the worst Hunter cards. I didn't pick Play Dead because I think we all know why Play Dead is bad. There's no need to talk about it.
Right.
But Exploding Bloat Bat, we have rated at a 78. Which is worse than an Ancient Mage. That's how bad we think this card is.
I totally agree with that. Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. But anyways, Exploding Bloat Bat, it's 4 mana for a 2/1 beast. And, whenever it dies, it deals 2 damage to all enemy minions. It doesn't even deal 2 damage to their face, man. All right? Okay. Obviously, you guys can see why I don't like it. It is a extremely slow card that your opponent can manipulate. And it doesn't it doesn't hit them in the face. It doesn't like it's just very frustrating as a card. And I played with it a couple of times because I've had to pick it. And each time I have basically said, man, I really wish you were just a 4-mana 4/4 that I can put out there and put some kind of pressure on either, the board or, like push his face. The bloat bat, even when you like set it up, you're never going to get like the perfect setup. And it's sort of the problem with Explosive Trap as well. Except Explosive Trap is 2 mana cheaper. Your opponent can determine when sort of this thing hits, right? And then they can respond appropriately, by making the necessary trades. And also, this doesn't even hit face like Explosive Trap does.
Not even like, if you're thinking about it as a consecration with a 2/1 body, that's just not what happens. And it suffers from the same thing that all things that are Death Rattle suffers from, which is what are you gonna do? Like you're using it reactively, so it's probably turn 6, 7, or whatever, and you play this. What are you gonna do with the rest of your mana? You can't do anything, because if you have actual other stuff, they're gonna trade the stuff that's gonna die into your other stuff before killing the bloat bat. What else can't you do? You obviously can't play it when you're up on the board. You may think, well, I play when I'm up on the board, and then I throw this in to something, and then I get 4 damage on that thing, 2 damage on everything else. I force him to play something big, and then eventually I'll trigger this and get value. You can't, because it has 1 health. Your opponent's going to ping it and kill a 4-drop, right? Like, you got to play when you're behind, and then you got to give your opponent the initiative. Like, that is not a good way to come back. It is very vulnerable. And what's the use of a comeback card that can't come back and can't be played when you're up? It's a hope for the best card. It's a hope for the best card. Like, here's 4 mana. I hope you do something. And it is potentially a panic card, but it's just not worth all that much when it has so many caveats to it. And I've actually used this card twice. It's been that bad. It has not gotten its value that you think it might get. It doesn't even get 4 mana's worth of value.
Yep. So look, Exploding Bolt Bat, bad card. We don't need to talk much more about it.
I think the reason we're talking about it, by the way, I know a lot of people are like, oh, obviously bad card, but like I don't think it's obvious. Like, I don't think it's obvious at all. It's a 4 mana consecration with a 2/1 body. That's insane. That should be a good card. Like, I feel like most players who are like newish to the game probably think this is a pretty decent card. But it's a really horrible card. And I thought like we needed to explain just how bad it is to have your opponent control stuff, right? Like, that's why Ticking Abomination is also bad. That's a 46. Like, if Ticking Abomination says, Battlecry, deal 5 damage to your minions, it would be an insanely good card.
Yep. It'd be pretty freaking good.
Yep. All right.
So,
sorry.
Let's move on to the Hunter as a class, right? This is a class that Hunter is probably the most sort of meta-dependent class. Like, it responds very, very well to meta shifts. You can always punish people with Hunter whenever there's a meta shift. And on the flip side, whenever the meta is established and if people are expecting Hunter, it really suffers. And mostly because its hero power is basically useless in the early turns, and it is a non-ping class as well. So you need to set up for your hero power. And where is Hunter right now? I've been playing a few times. I've gotten a couple of 12-win runs with Hunter, so it's certainly capable of going the distance. The problem I see with Hunter is, yes, you are still very kind of draft dependent if you want to play in an aggressive style, like it always has been. But I see Hunters going sort of even more of a polar direction now. And what I'm saying is you're either going to get like 4 wins or you're going to get like 11 or 12 wins just because of the draft. And also just because in a lot of games, whoever wins turn 1 and turn 2 just wins. That's basically it.
Against a Hunter, you get too much face damage on your opponent.
Right. As a Hunter, if you win turn 1 and turn 2, what are some of the themes of the KFT meta? Like, not as many comeback mechanics, right? ways to snowball onto the board. And with Hunter, you don't have to hold onto the board for the entire game. You just have to hold onto the board for a few turns, get that face damage in, and then even once they've stabilized, suddenly they're at 6 HP and you kill them.
Yep.
So with Hunter, I really see a big shift in not a shift, just like this very polar distribution whenever I play the way that I like, very aggressive style of Hunter.
What's very aggressive?
I would say, let's see, at least 4 1-drops, right? Like 8 2-drops, 6 3-drops, and then, just a very like.
Any 7-drops?
Oh, no.
Any 6-drops?
Not if I can help it, but sure. Let's toss one in there. Toss one in there.
Bone Mare good?
Yeah, I'll take a Bone Mare.
Would you ever take a Primordial Drake?
Right? I will take it, but it's one of those things where I'm like, because a lot of epic cards just suck, right?
Primordial Drake or Chillwind Yeti?
Yeah, I'd have to think about that.
Okay, so that's around where Drake is for you.
I would have to think about that. Yeah, like
okay,
I would
so
actually think.
Yeah, that's very aggressive.
Yep.
I would shave a bunch off all that. I want like 6, 7 2-drops. Like 2 2s, 2 1-drops are fine. Obviously, I prefer 4, but 2 is okay. I would definitely take 7-drops. No questions asked. I don't view 7-drops any worse for Hunter than anyone else. And I'm happy to have the game go on for a while. Because you're repeatedly being rewarded for keeping the board. And as Hunter, you want to get low enough so that you can take the board in the beginning. And then you don't really care. You will win the game at some point by swinging to the face. But by extending the window in which you can gather enough strength on the board to swing to the face, and by extending the window in which you could draw your cards that actually buff your board, I think you're giving yourself a very good chance to get that powerful swing turn. Like, you're upping your odds of getting the swing turn because of how the meta is set up in that way. So I don't mind making the game go on for a little bit longer than the Merps' decks will generally like try to go for. Obviously, you don't win the super long game unless you have Deathstalker Rexar. But I would be totally okay if I had 1 8-drop, 2 7-drops. Like, totally normal, not an issue. I would take Primordial Drakes at their, tier list stated values of like 144, or what is it in Hunter? Probably still at 144. 149 actually is even higher, because Hunter cards are generally higher rated than in other classes, and we don't rebalance across classes yet. But yeah. So I think there's different ways to play it in this meta, but the idea is that, especially in the early game, you want to try to get on the board, and then you want to hold the board, and it is vitally important, and then you need to determine when you're pushing face. If your deck is drafted lower, that time will come quicker, because you will be running out of cards at a certain point. And so before that, you really need to throw them at your opponent's face. And also before that, remember, every time you play 2 cards instead of 1 on a turn, you get 1 extra tempo usually than you would have before. So it's a way to actually also get the board, like if you push your curve even lower. Not just more consistency, but it will actually help you like upkeep your tempo on turns like 5 and 6 versus playing 1 card. But if you play 1 card and you have the board, then you have a higher chance, because you're extending the game, of drawing into cards that actually allow you to use your board in a positive way. So that's the give and take. And so if you're wondering, like if you're playing a deck and you have somehow drafted a very aggressive deck, know what you need to do. And if you somehow drafted a less aggressive deck, know where your advantages are. So Hunter has like 2 viable ways of drafting, although the playing is pretty similar generally. If you're ever out of cards and you haven't killed your opponent, you are not aggressive enough. If you ever kill your opponent and you're not out of cards, you are actually probably too aggressive. There's not that many board clears nowadays. So I wouldn't be too afraid of like, somehow having your entire board cleared. So if you're holding like 3 cards when you win the game, it's not a good thing, I think. I think you want to be holding like 1, at most 2 cards.
Yep. So that's kind of where Hunter is right now. I like it. I don't think it's, top tier right now, but I
right after that.
Yeah, it's right after that. I play with it. I have gotten multiple 12 wins with it. It's good. Like I feel confident playing the class, but be prepared to get sometimes 3-4 wins. It's going to be a struggle sometimes, but also if you play it a lot, you will get those 10, 11, 12 win runs that just feel so good, right? You just completely run over like sort of the mages and the warlocks that you face, and you have a pretty decent matchup with rogue, and unfortunately druid that's a tough matchup, but a lot of them play quite slow these days and try to rely on like the ultimate infestation, in which case you're gonna go faster than what they can do, and ultimate infestation can't even help them come back.
Yep. That's it. I think that's it for today's Lightforge. See you guys next week when we will hopefully, the card nerfs will hopefully be live, I hope. And maybe the synergies the week after that. That's super optimistic, but we're still going to be, just a reminder, we're still going to be in the synergy picks meta for like at least a couple more weeks, I think. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel now, whereas before, who knows? All right, until next week, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Good luck in the arena.
All right.